Thank you. I'm going to just share my webcam just to start so that I can greet you and say hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me. Today is the second session of intentional choices in support of your Corona journey. And we're going to focus on your relationship with intention and action. For so many of us, we find ourselves I'm sorry, I just see that a message has come on the screen, so if you can just ignore that for the moment. For so many of us, we have a different relationship between intention and action. For some of you, you may already you may not even have considered what your intention is during this stressful time. You may not have started to formulate your intentions because you're uncomfortable with where you are and you haven't got all the information you need at the moment. For others, you might even find yourself that you've moved into thinking about intention, but your relationship with this intention is that you don't translate it into action. And for others of you, you may already have gone into a whole lot of action in your environment and already started responding to this Corona journey with a bunch of actions. Either way, my invitation to you today is really for you to consider what is your relationship between intention and action. And do you move into intent? Do you move from intention into action in terms of the way that you operate? So I'm going to switch up my webcam now and just take us through the three areas we're going to be focusing on today. And I'm hoping that we can actually get rid of this message on the screen. It would appear that it doesn't want to hear me. Just hold on a moment and I will stop sharing and let's just see if we can dismiss it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we're going to deal with three items today. What is the intention action gap? The behaviors of successful plumbing businesses, which we have researched around 2 years ago, and what new behaviors might you be able to consider as you go forward. Remember, these sessions are in support of you as the individual who has the opportunity to make intentional choices. So behaviors are something that we can control. And I want to invite you to just consider this statement from a book which is written by Byron Brown called The Soul Without Shame. And the statement is, be willing to act on your own behalf. And essentially the invitation is at this time to consider the context of that statement was to consider how much you are spending, headspace you are spending in judging or criticizing yourself for what you have done well or not done well over the last part of your Corona journey. Because often this judgment can get in our way of actually being productive. Now, if you are really using that judgment or critical voice to spur you on and to take your intention to action, well, fair enough, then don't worry about parking the judgment or criticism at the moment. But if you are like other people and like most of us, and you tend to judge yourself or criticize yourself when you're in pressure or judge others, my invitation is right now to be willing to act on your own behalf and park that judgment. Put it on a whiteboard or put it into an imaginary box in your mind. You can always go back and pick it up again. But at this point, if it is not productive and not working for you, leave it, put it aside and really act on your own behalf. So as we go into this breakdown of intention and action, I just want to, before we go there, just recap what we covered last week, just for a couple of minutes. Last week, we spoke about doing some check-ins with yourself so that you could actively make a choice about whether you are taking this Corona journey in terms of Corona or as a core owner of the actual journey. And by checking in with yourself, just that invitation was to check in with yourself and others 3 times a day. It gives you the opportunity to reflect on how you've been showing up in the past and also how you choose to show up now and into the future. And we broke it down into a couple of hours at a time. That's why we invited you to check in 3 times a day. And you may well say, well, I've got big issues on my mind and, I'm thinking about days, hours, weeks, not just about hours, but weeks and months ahead for where I am at the moment with my family, with my relationships and in my business. But the reality is that we need to start small in order to develop that behavior of actually recognizing you are 100% in control of your choice of how you're actually going to behave in the next few hours. And that's why we break it down into small and manageable chunks. So we went on not only to do a check-in 3 times a day, but also to go into those parts of yourself which you are battling with at the moment and access the wisdom that comes out of that difficult situation. And as we checked out of last week's session, we actually had someone ask, I'm battling with the space, the small space I'm in. And the invitation is really to lean into that difficult situation and really access what do you value about the bigger spaces or the outdoors, or amplify your need. And if you access that brochure that I offered you on my website, you would have identified potentially, I'm just guessing, for that person, and if you're back, I thank you for being back, but you might have identified that you actually need some freedom or choice, one of those two aspects that you might be seeking and you're not getting in this locked up space. Now that you've taken a moment to access what you need and what your actual need is, this puts you in a position where you can actually decide on how you go forward. So let's have a look at what you do with that wisdom. If you know you have a choice, right? You want choice or you want freedom. I've just taken a guess. Now you know you are stuck in this space, this small space. You basically can't change that scenario. So what do you need to come along so that being in that space can be palatable? So you now recognize what you need. And if it was freedom you need, you may choose to do it in a simple way. You may choose to bring back that sense of freedom for yourself by listening to music. I found this amazing song called the Freedom Song by Jason Mraz. I mean, if music is your thing, if it's not your thing, you might choose to do something else, like go into your workshop and do some stuff in your workshop. But it's up to you to now identify what makes you feel free, other ways of meeting that need, as opposed to focusing on the corona space, which is this space is just too small for me. Maybe your need was choice, and it makes you feel confident to have choice. So then decide to watch a movie on your phone instead of doing what everybody else in the family wants to do. And this again allows you to feel confident in your choices. They're little things, but they are important things to manage the state of where you are. So having laid that foundation, now I want you to just reflect on how you are with intention and action, which was my original question. But first of all, let's understand what is this intention action gap. And what are we referring to? I want to introduce you to a mountain called intention over here. And here's this mountain. And it is separated by a huge valley between itself and another mountain called action. And this gap here is our state of mind. When we say, I intend to do something, and we never actually do it. I don't know if it's already happened to you in terms of the lockdown. You know, you intended to exercise every day, or you intended to catch up on all of your paperwork and stuff, but you haven't actually done that. So you basically, that difference between intending to do something and actually actioning it is what we call the intention action gap. And this gap is defined by the kind of intentional choices that you are making. You're choosing to chill out, or you're choosing not to take action. So my invitation is to think about what is it that is going to happen with the next 10 days of this lockdown or so. And if it's extended, what will your choices then be? So let's have a look at where the pressure is on intention. And maybe it's not the pressure, but it's really just your relationship. In so many businesses and in our daily life, we are being asked to kind of refresh and renew the way that we are thinking and the way that we are behaving. So the refresh part comes in, like we are called to actually change things, maybe not completely change them, but adjust our way of how we provide our product, adjust the way in which we deliver a service, and refresh the way we are actually living. Maybe we need to look a little at the way that we actually add our hygiene habits and our health habits, which is what we call to do at almost a personal level. But I was quite interested in an example that cinemas are using in another part of the world, where they are refreshing their processes with their customers. They are already implementing and moving from intention to action. but they are considering some of the intention in this kind of refresh phase is that they are in cinemas will remain will open again, but when they open, you will have to present at the cinema your kind of health check. And you will also go through this machine that does a temperature check. And in the cinema, you will sit one chair apart from each other, which is now a refresh process, but still gives you the experience of cinema. And a different type of example where it comes to renewing businesses that I was interested in the other day is where, in fact, the travel industry has anticipated that it's obviously going to be in a decline. So they renew a part of some of what I see emerging, and it has been here before, is that they're focusing on it as a new business model, is actually to move to online virtual touring. So we're being invited to kind of do a safari tour in a virtual sense as they change and create a completely new product or new market for themselves and reinvent their business. So the question now is, what do we need to actually fill this gap here? Now, there's a host of different things, but I'm going to focus on behaviors. So let's have a look at the top behaviors that we identified in research for successful plumbers. Now, the action that they would be implementing is obviously a successful business. So let's look at these behaviors and your relationship. As I go through them, I want you to think about your relationship to those behaviors. The first behavior for success was responsiveness, being highly responsive in a difficult situation as is required. And 2 weeks before the lockdown, I had a meeting with a plumber, and as I was leaving their premises, I said, I want to wash my hands. And they said, Debbie, you can wash your hands, but here I've got some disinfectant for you. You can put this in your handbag, and you can actually use it for your car, in your car, and you can now manage, any place you go to. If you can't wash your hands, you're welcome to use this disinfectant, which was, by the way, meeting the alcohol level that we required. And that was highly responsive to this situation. So they had already moved into action. Another behavior that successful plumbers have is having a sense of discipline. And that discipline is almost being able to work within the rules, being able to maintain time, being able to implement what I had. So already inside of you is a sense of discipline. And you already have some of these behaviors that you can tap into. The third one was personal ownership, taking control of a problem or a challenge and actually working with that problem and challenge myself and then implementing solutions to those problems. The next one is self-confidence. Now, self-confidence is an interesting one. It's the belief in ourselves, the trust we have in ourselves when we make a decision. And part of that trust is also knowing what I know and what I don't know. Now, in the entrepreneurial world, because I did my master's research on the intention action gap last year, we call this entrepreneurial self-efficacy. And it's the belief in myself to actually carry out entrepreneurial actions. And can I do it? Do I believe I can do it? Now, this becomes significant, especially when there's a significant relationship between self-confidence and the ability to narrow this gap, especially when we are renewing and refreshing our businesses. And so my invitation to you is to consider where you are and understand where you need support. This is a big deal, understanding what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, and knowing when I need to ask for help. And it may come in the form of a spouse, it could come through friends, it could come through your network and connections, a mentor or coach. But be aware of the self-confidence and where you are with this. And of course, then is this team inclination and the choice to work as a team. And then finally is the sense of curiosity. In times of being overwhelmed and where we're not maybe moving from intention to action, we need to be curious. We need to be learning and understanding so that we can actually go forward with some informed choices and intentional choices. So let's just take a moment to see where you are. How are you currently showing up in terms of these behaviors? And how is it serving you, your relationships, and your businesses at this point in time? And what I'd like to do, this is just a quick explanation of those activities I've already explained, of those behaviors I've explained to you. But what I'd like you to do is just take a personal poll for yourself on where you are. Do you strongly disagree that you have these activities? So you would be then a 1, or somewhere in between. To strongly agree, I have these behaviors and I actively practice them. Having taken a moment just to take that mental note for yourself, use that to inform you now in terms of your strengths and your weaknesses, and how do you support yourself going forward to move into the action phase. But I also invite you to think about the ways that you think. There are 2 ways, predominant ways that we think about things. And not everybody can do both of these kinds of thinkings. Now, don't be intimidated by the name divergent thinking. It's just a fancy name to say that we gather information and we're able to gather all of this information and link the information into patterns so that we can make decisions from that information. We can start to see trends and patterns and conceptually imagine solutions in our mind. So when we conceptually think, you may have a strength in that area, and that you are going to use reflection, evaluation, and revisit things. And in that phase, you generally, when we conceptually think, we access our network to really get information and input from other people. And this is when we get information and input from people that don't always know us, because these people will think differently to us. They won't know how we think, and so we will really expand our minds. Alternatively, we then also think convergently. In other words, we take all this information and we decide on what options we have, and then we make a choice that we feel will work and take us into action. Now, as I've said, not everybody can think with both of these types of patterns. Generally, we are stronger in one than another. But in order to inform our choices and take ownership, full ownership of your Corona journey, my invitation is to make sure that you are clear about where your strength lies, and make sure you bolster yourself and access support mechanisms to balance this thinking. So other types, so while you think about that, I want to invite you to also recognize that whilst we research those behaviors with plumbers, and I was involved with that research, and it was statistical, by the way, we found those statistical results in those behaviors. Here are some other behaviors that might not have been at the top of the top 5 behaviors, but I want to invite you into these behaviors to consider and ponder where you are with this at the moment. I've already spoken to conceptualizing things, but let's talk about innovation. How good are you at finding new ways of doing things that consider the system, that consider the social impact, and that are practical to implement? Think about how you do that. And I also want to invite you to consider that that the concept of innovation for many people is that we have to have this big bang innovation. We have to have this really, we wait until we can launch this perfect thing. But the new way of thinking is encouraging us to consider innovating incrementally, bit by bit, piece by piece, until we have 100% of our kind of thing that we want. And then when we get there, we find, okay, we want to even take it to the next level. So don't be intimidated by launching or creating this perfect thing. Think about innovating in your space, in your home. There are so many innovations going on. I was with a group yesterday that were talking about teachers who were talking about how they have to go onto online lessons, and they were concerned and intimidated by this. And they were also concerned about the impact on the client, which is essentially the students. Would they pass matric with this new way of learning? But they have to innovate. They have to take these steps, these small steps. And so taking those small steps, just getting the confidence to start it and practice and be on a kind of webinar through online technology, and seeing people and working in that way and communicating in that way, was their first small step towards innovating to get the confidence to actually do online teaching. Resilience, the ability to remain in the game, to continue to meet the challenges in front of you, despite the many challenges that you have, and maintain a positive mindset and to deal with frustration, that ability to hit barriers and blocks and to overcome it. These are choices we make and behaviors we can access in order to move from intention to action and intentionally choose to actually narrow this gap. So my question now is, let's do another little quick check-in. What behaviors are you thinking of that you need to supplement for yourself or to develop or are strong at? Don't always think about what you don't have. Think about what you have. What do you have in your toolbox that you can use to actually move forward? If you don't have them, who has them? And how can you mobilize them so that you can narrow this intention to action gap, as you can see from this diagram? Remembering that, please remember, behaviors can be learned. It is not true that we cannot learn new behaviors because we are too old to do it. That is not true. That is a myth. There is much research that talks about the neuroplasticity of our brain. We can learn new things. It may take us a little bit of time. So it can take at least 21 days. And to do that, we need to be able to take small steps towards that outcome. Don't give ourselves these huge, enormous goals in order to achieve. Define the little steps towards it and step by step work towards that new behavior. It's about practicing on a small scale, like I used in the example to the introduction, reflecting and revisiting. So once again, I want to ask you to do a personal poll for yourself. Where do you rate yourself on these other behaviors that I have invited you into, to innovate, resilient, be resilient, conceptualize, and problem solve? And as you check out and become aware of those other behaviors, I want to invite you to go to the resource that is on my website, which just helps you to understand your current behaviors. Because in order to make an intentional choice, we need to be able to understand where we are. And remember, you are not a victim. You can control your reactions. You do have a choice. And this is a researched outcome under very, very difficult circumstances where people are fully overwhelmed, where Caroline Leaf has conducted this research. And I leave you with just a reflection again. Your behaviors reflect your intentional choices. And make sure that you are clear about the key behaviors you are showing up with. You can choose to change it right now, how you show up in the next few hours, in the next kind of minutes. And may you be the change that you want to see. And thank you very much. So I'll open it for questions if there's any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Debbie. I believe this was quite an informative session. I see there is just one question that just came in. So the question is external obstacles, example labor laws and the influence on small business, negative influence on teamwork.
Can I just ask, what is the question in there? Is it about how we deal with that? I'm not quite sure what the question is asking.
Okay, we'll just wait for that person to respond. We do also have a bit of feedback from the audience. The feedback is brilliant. I did not consider this way of thinking at all. Thank you. And then from another person, thank you. Great words. It was amazing. So a lot of positive feedback from the audience. And I see another question just came in. Where can one get more information and leadership guidance on subject?
Oh, okay. There are a couple of different resources available. I'd like you to consider a book by Caroline Leaf called Switching on Your Brain. It's a really nice resource. That book that I also quoted on Soul Without Shame is an excellent resource. And please continue to scroll my website, so we'll provide resources for your ongoing, and I will have ongoing conversations about moving from intention to action, because it's a real issue given the amount of, I'm just trying to link to that first question, amount of external factors that are influencing us. It really is important that we are able to control our own state of mind, because the part we can't control is those external factors. But what we can control is our response to them. So I will be looking at releasing a series of materials that will help you with making this transition from intention to action and narrowing this gap as we go forward.
Okay, perfect. And I'd just like to say the initial question wasn't really a question, it was more of a statement. The statement is learn to handle such influences.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That's a really important thing. And it also raises something for me. We do have experience, you have had much experience as if you're a business owner or you are a leader in your own right, a mom, a father, you have been running and leading things for ages. You can solve problems and you have got experience. And you might not have experience with Corona, but what I want you to invite you to just think about what in your experience, those generic skills, has equipped you to respond to be able to respond in a positive way, in a way that energizes you to those external influences. Think about that. Your problem-solving skills, the fact that you may be a positive mind, you may have a positive mindset, the fact that you have many skills in business. Don't ignore your experience. You have got experience that you can draw on. It's not like you have to reinvent the whole wheel internally. You have got stuff you can access.
Okay, another statement just came in. Pity government and corporates make our lives a misery besides other factors.
Yeah. And thank you for bringing that into it. And that's part of that kind of internal reflection, that critical voice, that judgment that happens for us. And it is a pity, but it is a reality. But again, I want to invite you into it. You can choose to say, okay, I am kind of sit in this pitiful space and really feel down, and it's okay to be like that. Please believe me, it is okay to feel that way. Acknowledge it. Sit with it for a little while so that you can access the wisdom you need in order to function and to respond to that. Because we can't change government. But one exercise I can encourage you to do, just touch your nose for a moment. And if you touch your nose, and think about what is behind that nose. That is the only thing we are in control of. You are not in control of how government is going to respond. We can only be in control of what we respond, or how we respond.
Okay, I believe that's it for all the questions. But I'd just like to mention, David, there's a lot of positive feedback coming from the audience, so thank you very much for that. And I urge everyone to please fill in the survey, as that will just help us improve our services towards you. And there will be a recording on the IOPSA YouTube channel and the plumbing app in case you've missed anything. Is there anything you'd like to add before I end off, Debbie?
No, just a real sincere thank you to all of you for attending. And I just want to continue to encourage you and invite you to think about the fact that you are absolutely in control of your choices, and just break it down into bite-sized chunks. You don't have to go into this big response. Just small, tiny responses will help you to access your own wisdom. Thank you very much for being here.